Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Doctor Who Guide. Today, I'm super excited to be interviewing a very special guest who has worked with me on my story. I was lucky enough to have this wonderful illustrator, Kris, work on my story in the Doctor Who 1997 annual. Kris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, nice to see you. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that whole process. It's been a lot of work, but I think what we collaborated on turned out pretty great. Yeah, here's the time lapse. So it starts off with the previous game board that I did because I had it on this template file that Mark had sent me. So, we have the bounding box and, this outer area where you don't want any important information. And then the center page and the area here, you're not supposed to have much of anything since like 2 inches to either side of the page will essentially not be legible at all. So that's something I had to keep in mind as well. So yeah, I just wanted to reference that old shape, and I knew for sure that I wanted to do angles instead of curves for this one since it felt like more of like this structured maze instead of like this free form like aquatic adventure. So that was one of the first things I was thinking of. Yes, so this is that first step of process. I started circling where I wanted this important information to go. So my first step was writing out the numbers that you mentioned directly in the steps. So step 10 is eventually where Stacy's going to be with her ventilation shaft. So I knew the console was going to be here. The instructions were going to be maybe below it, maybe next to it, doesn't matter. But that general square I was saving for the large illustration. And the scarf was one of the first things I thought of. And as we can see at first, this diagonal line comes a lot further to the right. But as time goes on, that'll probably scoot over. All right, let's go back a bit, actually. A lot happened here. So now I'm trying to figure out the actual, images. At first, the Eighth Doctor was like much larger, but, I didn't know where to put everyone else. So that'll change later on. We have this very illegible sketches of the Eighth Doctor and Sardan. I think that's always a fun thing to see. It's like these are shorthand notes that no one else is going to understand, but it was just that's enough for my brain to be able to jump back to. So that next step, it kind of sped through that, but I found, this one reference photo, and if I wanted to just freehand this console, I would probably have to easily add 5 hours to that total of 35 hours. So I did do a general trace of that, but it doesn't go down to the very details. It just helps with the perspective. And over here with the Eighth Doctor, it flashed for a second, but I found a reference photo online of this person playing a harp. So I was looking at that as well. I didn't know exactly where he was going to go yet. So I just kind of have that illustration floating, and it looks like I'm getting the idea for the trusses running down the center at this point. So now this is 7 seconds in, and if we think of like that's around 1/4 of this video, so this is somehow already like 7 hours of work somehow, which is there's really not much to look at yet, but it's just all of that thinking takes a while. So now I'm getting a clearer idea of what was happening. Actually, if I jump back, I think this is one of the first images I probably sent you, one of those first updates.
Yep.
So one of the parts we ended up fixing is over here with Stacy. At first it was a side view, but then you sent me that reference from that one episode of Stacy in the ventilation shaft in that episode, and not Stacy, of Sarah Jane. So then I was able to edit that, change that section. Now we have their silhouettes coming to life over here. And for illustrating this part, I need to go find these cosplayers and credit them, but I was looking for more angles of the TARDIS to directly reference for better quality, since the quality of the TV movie, the resolution's quite low. So I had to look in other places to get references for the bits and pieces on the console. And then I was also looking at this image down here for lighting again. I think that's the same one that I used for reference for that first illustration I did of the title illustration. So yeah, now it's the line art phase, and this is just, now we're already at 15 hours. Don't know how that happened, but this is, line art phase, takes quite a while, but it's going to happen fast. It just gets very technical. I'm just going to go in and essentially clean everything up. So it's just going to happen. So I often do refined sketches like we see here with Sard. I'll do that first and then I'll go in again. Sometimes I'll just go straight into the line art if the messy sketch was enough. For the line art here, as I said before, that one's going to be traced since that was just so much to even imagine. Or the rough sketch was traced and now it seems like I'm going in and doing that fully by hand. I have all these different references hiding beneath the rest of the line art. I was gathering it from every corner of the internet because even the one I was tracing wasn't that clear. So I had to gather from like everything to try and get some images. I actually have a Twitter mutual who I found out like, you know, lived right near me. So now we're like good friends in real life. And he was able to send me some behind the scenes images of the console room and like some different angles of the set so I could actually architecturally understand what was going on, which was super helpful. So kudos to him for getting those to me. But, you know, if we're looking at this video, something I want to point out is we're 5 seconds from the end. There's not a single color on this page. The line art's not even done. And it's like, I don't know, that hurts my brain that at this point it is technically mostly finished and yet there's nothing filled in. So the next 5 seconds are going to be hectic. So I'm just preparing you for that. All right, here we go. And 3, 2, 1, it's done. So those last few seconds,
goodness.
let me get that paused, but it happens fast. So I'll just click through it. The way that the time lapse works is that it essentially takes screenshots of the canvas every couple of minutes. And it has a full 30-minute video of my progress that I can go look at, but this is a 30-second condensed one, meaning each of these photos is probably like 30 minutes apart in my progress or 15 minutes, something like that. So it's going to make these huge jumps when I go frame by frame. But step one was getting that background in. That's always first because that's the only way you're able to actually tell the color of an object. Because if I put like normal green, like I just colored green on a white background for Sard, and then I put this background in, it would probably be way too light and it just wouldn't work. So it's always important to get background colors in first because that completely changes what all of the other colors look like once they get added in. So next step was, you know, this is that reference image I was talking about before. I'm going to constantly be turning that on and off to get an idea of what I'm doing. Yeah, so I actually, it looks like I decided not to do warm for that anymore. So at first I had this like brown color behind them, but that ended up becoming blue as I was checking out all these other references. And I really liked this one promo image and like that faded hazy blue leading up like through the light. So that was my main reference for this part. Yeah, so that's the jump from unrendered to rendered in that corner. So yeah, it's just getting into detail with the textures. We've got the console room happening. Well, not the console room, the console. So that's, you know, somewhat filled in, and then adding all the lights, and the candles are now done. Now we've got working on the characters and filling in Stacy. All of that, just looking at these random stock images of electrical fires to figure out how those sparks work. Because, you know, it doesn't have to be that realistic, but, you know, it helps visually to figure out what's going on. So that gets filled in. Then we move on to the harp. I did it pretty methodically, which I was surprised by. Normally I'll jump around in many different places, but since each of these was kind of its own illustration, I really zoned in on each part separately. So he gets filled in, then we have the scarf, and I saved the hardest part for last. This one, it happens in 2 frames. I was scrubbing through the time lapse earlier, so it's just going to jump to finished. But that part was exciting to do, but pretty fast, as I said, because I was just able to do one side and mirror it. But yeah, that was the process. There's a couple of different edits and lighting tricks that I did after this, but it's on a separate file. So those are not
Mhm.
recorded in this time lapse.
I mean, that's just, I mean, mind-boggling that so much happens, and it was just the last 5 seconds of the video. I mean, that is so cool
We
to
jump right here,
see.
the liner, it's not even done. It's crazy.
And I love seeing, all of the references and just the research and like you say, all of that planning. Like it wasn't like any of this was isolated. The reason that, the coloring could go in so fast was because of all of the thought and, research and work that you would put in designing everything else prior. So it feels almost like, and I'm sure it didn't at the moment, but like an exponential curve almost because, you
Absolutely.
have,
That's how I view it.
right, the this time where, like, halfway through it's looks like you've just begun, and then towards the end it just speeds right up. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think an exponential graph is a great way to view it because that research and sketching takes forever. And the second I finish my line art, it just goes. And it still takes a long time, granted, but
Right, right,
it's a lot more, I guess, natural. There's a lot less thinking. It's stuff that I've studied for so long that it's kind of like intuitive color theory. Like
right.
explaining it out loud right now is probably more like words being put to those thoughts than I had when I was thinking about those colors. Like I was not thinking like about the warm and the cold like in that concise of a manner like that concretely, but it is definitely part of my thought process. That's like part of what you learn as an artist, I guess. That's how you improve, because anyone with enough amount of time could recreate any image they want, but it's about getting those processes part of like your intuition. So you don't want to think about them because making art is making hundreds of decisions per second. So instead of, making that one deliberate choice, it just has to happen almost naturally. But yeah, I think that's exactly why it just speeds up during that part, because it's a lot less like deliberate thinking on my part than when I'm thinking of like the anatomy and the composition. That's a lot more analytical for me, for sure.
Right. I mean, that's what's surprises me is that there was so much, analytical thought that went into this artistic endeavor. And I mean, I'm just so impressed by that. And, it's fascinating what you mentioned about the color theory. And that was something that was kind of a revelation to me as, I learned that, you don't just start with one color. You tend to lay down your darker colors and then your lighter colors on top. But I'd
Yes.
not thought of the fact that, the color theory, I know I've seen online, like this is the same color, but it's next to another color and it looks completely different. That
Yep.
boggles my mind. So it does make sense now that you're saying, like, well, that green that looked fine against the white of a blank, line art page with that blue in the background is now going to look off
Mhm.
and wrong. And I mean, clearly all of that practice and all of the art that you've made, it seems to build off of, every, this isn't just this one piece. It's all of the other pieces that you've drawn before that
Exactly.
have informed your muscle memory, your, intuition, your instincts. I mean, it's just incredible. And as you were saying, like there was a lot of time between when you do those first illustrations, and it just shows how you were just constantly improving throughout that time. I mean, I think you did a great job with combining them together. I didn't think, oh my gosh, this is like drastically different. Um, but I absolutely loved it when I saw it, and I have so much more appreciation for it. And I love that you've broken it down for us this way because, and I don't know if, like, was there an intentional? I'm almost seeing in the I want to call it a ladder in the path of in the pathway there, almost the shape of 25. And it was the 25th anniversary in 2022. So I just think that's a kind of a nice little nod to the fact that we are over 25 years into, at the anniversary of the 1997 movie. So I don't know if that was intentional or not, or if
That
I'm
was
just reading,
absolutely not intentional, but I see it now, and I actually just had like you'll see it on the camera. I had an epiphany moment where like, yeah, that is a 2 and a 5. I absolutely see that. That's really cool, actually. Wow, that's fun.
I say we say that it was intentional.
Yeah, we can pretend. But really quick, I want to jump back to what you're saying about like the videos you've seen online of, oh, this color is the same as this color. That's actually a phenomenon that we learned about in school, and it has a name, and it's called simultaneous contrast, where one color surrounded by other colors will be completely different in another context. And it's actually used in art so much to ways that it still hurts my brain, where if I put the color gray, like if I put it on top of starred, like actual pure gray, it will look a little pink. It will be red. It will not look gray. So if I wanted gray to be next to starred, it will have to actually be closer to blue. It will have to be tinted like green and teal, because if I just put plain gray, it will then be compared to that color. But it's a deliberate phenomenon, which is something that blew my mind when learning about art, is that that stuff is just real. And so when I see all of these like illusion videos, it's stuff that I feel like I see when I'm a kid, where it's like, oh, the which giant is bigger, and it's like, oh, they're the same size, because then you put them next to each other and it's like the same image. It's that same concept where it really is just an illusion, but it's something that you can learn and create like accessible, like it's something that you can use as a tool, which I think is just like so cool.
It is I mean, so fascinating because I on TikTok, there's this one person that I see in my feed fairly often where what he does is he color matches, and
Yep.
he like, throws the paint on, and you think to yourself, surely there's no purple in this color that he's trying to match. Surely there's no green, but he adds them in, and it color matches to the point where you can't even tell where he painted anymore. And so, I mean, that just reminded me what you were talking about. It was just uh, the incredible ways in which art is not nearly as straightforward as you might think, and how the colors that are around them just change our perception. And it is, I mean, it must be wild to like compare like what you were saying about making a color bluer in order to color correct almost for the surrounding colors. And I was once color correcting this very long like project. It was a short film, and on my computer, I saved all the color correcting for one part, and so I had been color correcting for about 2 hours, and I realized that I had turned my computer onto, or my computer was set to the night mode, where the screen gets warmer and more orange and less blue,
Mhm.
so that it's better for your sleeping late at night. And I realized I've been color correcting my scenes to be bluer and cooler as it was getting less blue and cooler. So I had to go back and redo that work. But yeah, that was fun.
Absolutely. That's color correcting video is very difficult, but yeah, the night mode changes everything. Or sometimes I'll be drawing and my brightness will be down, and that completely
Oh.
affects it as well.
Well, thank you so much for showing all of that incredible art and talking us through your process. I knew there would be a lot, but there was so much more there than I ever thought, and I just learned so much, and it's been so fascinating. And I just think, those are just a couple of our pages that we contributed to the annual, and there's so much more that's in there. And I'm just so excited to be able to look at this and get a real behind the scenes look at what went into all of that incredible art, and just gain a better understanding for it. So thank you so much for that time, for that research, for the skills that you shared. Oh my gosh, it's just been amazing. So thank you so much for joining me here today, and just sharing that. It's been amazing.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for having me on here to talk about it, because it's not something I verbalize a lot. It's just like something I do. So being able to talk about that process has been just such a great experience. And like what you said, I'm really excited to see all of these other pages, because all of the work you put into your story and all the work I put into my art, that is existing through the entire book, all of these people putting in all this care. So it's just like such an amazing project, and I'm so excited to see it.
Me too. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. If you want to get your own copy of the annual, links are in the description down below. Thank you so much for joining me, Kris.
All right, thank you for having me.